This program is put on by the Guild Museum of Arcadia Heritage, which is right next door, and we're happy that you all came today. I know you will enjoy our speaker. He's very special to us too. But first, I want to let you know about our speaker for next month as well. We do this every third Thursday of the month. And next month on May 15th, our speaker will be Floretta Lauber, former mayor of Arcadia. And she will be presenting a talk on the first 100 years of the Arcadia Women's Club. It's the Women's Club 100th anniversary. So hopefully you will all come to that. That's in May. And next month in April, we will be having Chuck Lyons from the San Gabriel Mission, and he will be talking about the history of the mission. So, but today, our speaker is from the Speakers Bureau of the Los Angeles County Arboretum, and he's also one of our museum commissioners. And so I hope you all give our speaker today a warm welcome. And this is Vince Foley, and his talk is on Hollywood at the Arboretum.
Thank you, Dana. That's Dana Hicks, by the way. She didn't introduce herself, so I'll introduce her. She's the curator of our museum, so she runs that place next door, and the museum puts on these brown bag things. First of all, a little bit of a genesis of how this program got started. Back in 2002, Huell Hauser decided to come to the Arboretum and film a episode. But the Arboretum folks weren't told what the episode was going to be or what it was going to be about, so they had no clue what to expect. So when the Arboretum doesn't have a clue as to what to expect, they call me because I'm clueless as well. So I showed up, and Huell Hauser showed up with his cameraman, and he said he wanted to see everything we could tell him about and show him about Lucky Baldwin. Well, we went around the Arboretum for a couple of hours, and he produced a show, and it's called Lucky Baldwin Arboretum Cottage. In fact, it was just on last Tuesday again, on Visiting with Huell Hauser. It's been on like 10 times since 2002. And in fact, I was told that it is the most popular episode that Huell Hauser ever filmed. Of course, it was my mother who told me that. And just to let you know, my mother never lied. So I'm not about to dispute her. Well, when Huell was at the Arboretum and we were going around, the conversation inevitably led to a lot of the movies that were filmed at the Arboretum, especially when we got to the Queen Anne Cottage and we talked about Fantasy Island and all that kind of stuff. Well, he was absolutely amazed at the number and plethora of films and commercials, and didn't realize that that was really a Hollywood backlot. So he said, you know, I could do a whole show just on movies at the Arboretum. And I thought to myself, so could I. So the curator of the Arboretum at the time, Sandy Snyder, and I got together. We put together this process, this program, looking at thousands, literally thousands of pictures from the early days of filming, got together a whole bunch of what we think were representative of all the filming at the time, and we put it all together, and we've been showing this production or presentation ever since, one of our most popular at the Arboretum, and it is called Hollywood at the Arboretum. The Arboretum is 127 acres of scenic wonder. Its popularity as a Hollywood backlot is legendary. In fact, its use by movie studios predates the Arboretum itself by 11 years. Some of the more popular Arboretum sites with Hollywood location managers are popular with everyone. Baldwin Lake here is a top attraction. The old jungle, which is now called the prehistoric forest, along the lakeshore could be anything from the South Seas to deepest Africa. A primary asset of the Arboretum for Hollywood is our variety of scenery and the vast expanse of it. The proximity to Hollywood is also a plus. Keeping travel time down helps overtime costs down for budget-conscious producers. Tallock Knoll's native stand of Engelmann oaks and unobstructed views of undeveloped land put it on the Hollywood hit parade of location filming. The Bower Pool, Fountain, and Lawn, currently also known as the California Philharmonic Lawn, is yet another popular area for filmmakers. We've had everything here from spaceships to the White House to the flames of hell. The first documented film shot, at least in part at the Arboretum, was Tarzan Escapes in 1936. Now, this is not Tarzan Escapes. This is the first film that we have a picture of. And this is a film called The Buccaneer. It was a Cecil B. DeMille epic, and it was released in 1937 with Frederick March. He's the guy on the hill on the left. And he was Jean Lafitte, helping President Andy Jackson repel the British during the War of 1812. Tallock Knoll's Engelmann oaks became part of the Deep South by festooning them with Spanish moss. The young man on horseback at the far right, by the way, is a 22-year-old Anthony Quinn. He's way on the right on horseback. I can't even see the horse. This 1938 aerial shows what would, in 1947, become the Arboretum, the dark area in the center. All of the land shown here was sold by Anita Baldwin, Lucky's daughter, in 1936. The buyer was Harry Chandler of the Los Angeles Times, who headed a real estate group known as Rancho Santa Anita Incorporated. When the old ranch lands were subdivided and sold as residential lots, the central portion around Baldwin Lake was put on loan, if you will, to the Assistance League of Southern California, a philanthropic group with which Anita Baldwin had been active. Lee Ray Turner, the lady in the hat here in the middle, she was the film location for the Assistance League, and as such, responsible for writing all the contracts with the movie studios. The proceeds of the grounds rentals went to the Assistance League. Ms. Turner's daughter donated all these early black and white photographs that we have in our archive. Interestingly, when the Arboretum and its private foundation came into being in 1974, Lee Ray Turner was hired as the first executive secretary. With her excellent contacts in Hollywood, she continued renting the grounds. Only now the proceeds went to the fledgling Arboretum. The natives here were extras on the set of On the Isle of Samoa, a 1951 movie starring John Hall, second from left. In 1952 and 53, John Hall was Ramar of the Jungle, a non-network television series with 52 episodes filmed almost entirely at the Arboretum. In 1953, the movie Royal African Rifles was filmed in its entirety on Arboretum property in just 6 days. Note Tallock Knoll's Engelmann Oaks once again, though this time they are in 1910 Africa instead of the southern United States. Lewis Hayward, who is second from left, and Veronica Hearst on the right were the stars. Meanwhile, back to pre-Arboretum days, this is Devil's Island, shot in 1938 on the shore of Baldwin Lake. The star was Boris Karloff, the tall guy just to the right of center. The year 1939 was a bustling one for the property. You all remember Fred McMurray, though he was enjoying a honeymoon in Bali here long before parenting television's My Three Sons. A huge set was constructed on the east shore of Baldwin Lake in 1939 for Road to Singapore, the first of the Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Dorothy Lamour road pictures. Note the old Baldwin adobe barely visible on the south shore of lake. The movie set's village is on the far left, the east shore, just beyond all the boats. And here they are, Hope and Crosby, strolling through that movie set village. Baldwin Lake is to the right of the tall eucalyptus trees. The two playboys got their comeuppance from the indomitable Dorothy Lamour in all of the road pictures. One more scene, still at Baldwin Lake, with Hope and Crosby on the steps of one of the several shacks constructed for Road to Singapore. Paramount Studios produced both Road to Singapore and Safari in 1939, and they were both released the next year in 1940. Safari here kept the same shacks on the lake, but added a big warehouse, the one that says Impala Hardwoods, and a paddle wheel boat. Now, the boat looked way too big for little Baldwin Lake, and apparently it was. Local newspapers reported that it sank 3/4 of the way through the filming. On the paddle wheeler, and hopefully not present when it sank, were stars Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Madeline Carroll. This same film, incidentally, put in an airport landing strip and a hangar out in the middle of what is today our Meadowbrook area. Paramount's Typhoon, also in 1939, starred Dorothy Lamour in her famous sarong and Robert Preston, later of Music Man fame. The treehouse behind them was constructed by Paramount, and it's not really a tree at all. The area is probably the old jungle north of Baldwin Lake. Moon Over Burma, again Paramount Studios in 1940, also starred Dorothy Lamour and Robert Preston, only this time wearing clothes and getting all wet. Now, if you think they were very fortuitous in filming this on a day that it rained, actually this is where all the rain came from. This was probably closer to the Queen Anne cottage, perhaps out on the lawn, or just to the south of where the old boathouse was. Paramount's 1941 film Among the Living was in the same vicinity. Among the prestigious cast were star Albert Decker, second from left, Francis Farmer standing next to him, and Harry Carey right in the middle of the picture. After the war came Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious in 1946. The stars seated here lakeside next to the Baldwin adobe. From left to right are, who's on the far left? Right. Who's on the far right? Who? Claude Rains is correct. Who's next to Claude Rains? Ingrid Bergman. Who's next to Ingrid Bergman? Nobody knows. I don't know either. But we think it might have been somebody by the name of Leopold Constantine. But is that Leopold Constantine? Anyway, she was pointing at this lady, and I thought maybe it was Leopold.
Oh, no, I was just asking if we could move the microphone.
Okay, they want to move the microphone. So that was Notorious, and Ingrid Bergman actually autographed this photo. You can see her autograph right above her hat, and she autographed that for Lee Ray Turner. Now, it's harder to spot John Wayne here, but he too had a stint at the Arboretum. He's the guy on the sailing ship in cap and striped shirt. The movie was Wake of the Red Witch in 1948, and the boat he's standing on is the Melbourne Queen, not to be confused with the African Queen, which was not filmed at the Arboretum, at least as far as our written records indicate. On the other hand, stories about Tarzan and Jane running around the Arboretum are absolutely true. Tarzan and the Huntress here in 1946 was not the first, nor the last, but one of many, many Tarzan movies shot at the Arboretum. The stars seen here are Olympic swim champion turned actor Johnny Weissmuller as Tarzan, Brenda Joyce as Jane, Johnny Sheffield standing in the front with a paddle, and he was Boy, and of course, Cheetah as Cheetah. A local newspaper article reported that Johnny Weissmuller actually set an unrecorded Olympic swim record one day when the caged crocodiles on the shore somehow got loose and decided to swim in Baldwin Lake with Johnny. According to movie critics, as Johnny Weissmuller got older and heavier, as we all do, it was decided that he would look much better in safari clothing than loincloth. And voila, he became Jungle Jim. Back to the Arboretum he came for 15 Jungle Jim movies. This is Jungle Manhunt in 1951. His co-star is Sheila Ryan. Other Tarzans at the Arboretum included Gordon Scott, seen here in 1955's Tarzan's Hidden Jungle. This became one of the original 4-color postcards produced by the Arboretum for sale in the gift shop. Now, I bet you didn't know that there was a Japanese Tarzan in 1955. Yoshihiro Hamaguchi portrayed Bruba, with Yuko Yashio as Raiko, or Jane. Mr. Hamaguchi, in a parallel to Johnny Weissmuller, was Japan's 1952 Olympic swimming champion. This was his first acting role, and the movie Bruba was the first Japanese film ever made entirely in the United States. Even commercials jumped on the Tarzan bandwagon. This unidentified big game hunter has netted wheat checks. Different genre and way down in the B- ranks were some early low-budget horror films filmed at the Arboretum. That was horror films. These are giant leeches, in case you didn't recognize them, as in 1959, Attack of the Giant Leeches, with Ken Clark and Yvette Vickers. These guys are not the stars. According to an article in Scary Monster magazine, these two men had to make the low-tech costumes themselves out of heavy-gauge plastic and chicken wire. They said swimming in them was very difficult. Everyone was literally in Baldwin Lake during this 8-day shoot, even poor Yvette Vickers, who had no costume beyond a bathing suit and didn't even know how to swim. Our photo archives have a blank section in the 1960s to the mid-70s. We know of television episodes that were shot at the Arboretum, but without Lee Ray Turner, apparently no one was taking any pictures. This newspaper clipping documents a TV special called Y'all Come, filmed at the Queen Anne Cottage in 1967. Actress Jane Amber and the singing group The Sportsmen, who were regulars on the Jack Benny Show, were stars of the special. Television miniseries became the craze in the 1970s. This was part of a 6-episode one called Lincoln in 1974, starring Hal Holbrook, who posed for an old Instamatic snapshot during a break in the filming at our Santa Anita Depot. Both the miniseries and Mr. Holbrook, by the way, won Emmys that year. In the late 1970s, the Arboretum played host to one of the more famous of the miniseries, Alex Haley's Roots 2. Scenes from the final episode were shot at several Arboretum locations. Baldwin Lake here was the river traversed by Alex Haley to return to Kunta Kinte's African village. James Earl Jones, seen in the prow of the boat, portrayed Alex Haley. The African village itself was set up in our Australian section, naturally. A few non-African eucalyptus trees in the background didn't seem to bother anyone other than Arboretum botanists. Aha! Television pilots were another thing of the 70s. And this filming of the 1975 pilot for the TV series Wonder Woman attracted quite a large crowd of Arboretum gardeners in particular, one of whom got this snapshot. The trees around the front and the picnic lawn here have never been so thoroughly pruned as they were between peaks at the past Miss USA, star Linda Carter, and Wonder Woman's sidekick, Cloris Leachman. Segueing to 1977 and continuing through 1984, the TV series Fantasy Island put the Arboretum on the Hollywood map. Not only the TV pilot movie, but also parts of several episodes were shot at the Arboretum. The exterior of the Queen Anne cottage was used extensively, including stock footage in the opening sequence. Both the amphibious plane landing on the lake and Tattoo ringing the bell in the tower of the cottage. The plane here was in fact a registered Scan 30 Widgeon leased for 2 days from Long Beach Airport. The illusion of just landed speed was created on Baldwin Lake with the aid of a quick release rope secured to the tail. When the engines were revved up, the rope was released and the plane jetted across the water like it was shot out of a slingshot. A plywood facsimile of the fuselage was mounted on a floating platform at the old Baldwin Boathouse and was used regularly for the endless guest stars who arrived on Fantasy Island. In its second year on the air, Columbia constructed a replica of the Queen Anne cottage on its back lot. The stars Ricardo Montalban, who played Mr. Rourke, and Hervé Villechaize, Tattoo, are seen here in front of the backlot cottage. Notice, as I'm sure all of you aficionados have already done, that the entrance is actually reversed from the real Queen Anne cottage and is seen here attached to a totally different building visible in the background. Now, in 1983, Hervé Villechaize left the series and was replaced by actor Christopher Hewitt, who played Mr. Rourke's butler. Here they are seen on the steps of the real Queen Anne cottage. The Queen Anne cottage remains so closely identified with Fantasy Island that even 5 years later, in 1989, the TV series Murder, She Wrote felt it necessary to do up the cottage in rainbow sherbet stripes. Star Angela Lansbury was rather reclusive, although we did manage to get one shot of her amidst the hubbub of filming at the cottage. However, nighttime soap opera Dallas generated lots of excitement at the Arboretum when these decidedly not reclusive guys showed up in 1981. From left to right are Steve Canale, star Larry Hagman, and good-looking brother Patrick Duffy. The storyline for the Arboretum episode involved the three men searching for their father's downed airplane. It looks like they've found something else besides a downed airplane. They set up camp in our Australian section and proved to be as outgoing in person as they were in character. Larry Hagman actually ran out into the road when one of our trams came by, flagged it down, jumped on board, and announced to the visitors that there were movie stars all over the place. You'd better get off and see. So, of course, they all promptly did just that. and the tram driver was left wondering what to do next. The unsuspecting person here, swept off her feet, was our history curator, Sandy Snyder, attempting to document the action. Doesn't look like she's documenting anything there to me. The TV series Heart to Heart ran about the same time, 1979 through 85, and its stars too were quite accessible. Out on the Bower lawn are Stephanie Powers and Robert Wagner, far right, who portrayed sleuths Jonathan and Jennifer Hart. The TV series Heart to Heart ran about the same time, 79-85, and its stars too were quite accessible. Guest stars are always fun to get a quick peek of. This is William Wyndham and Ava Gabor that were in that same Heart to Heart episode on Bower Lawn. And that's Robert Wagner in the background. Another Heart to Heart episode set in the Hugo Reed Adobe courtyard brought Cesar Romero as the guest star, supposedly in a Peruvian village. In 1983, TV series Falcon Crest used the Rose Garden as a wedding episode. Star Jane Wyman, who was Ronald Reagan's first wife, can be seen striding along with some evil intent in mind. Looks like she was about to crash something. In 1986, The Love Boat came ashore to also use the Rose Garden for a wedding episode. In the audience, left to right, are Ted Lang as Isaac, Lauren Hughes as Julie, and Ted McGinley as Ace, the photographer. The character getting married was Doc, played by Bernie Coppell on the far left.